ready to get down to business? Join seasoned entrepreneur, community leader, and Army veteran Scott Shalom Klein, who will take you behind the scenes with those who work in America's small business scene and speak with leaders making an impact, creating jobs, and telling their story in entrepreneurship. So let's get down to business. On AM 560, The Answer, here's your host, Shalom Klein.
And indeed, we're all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. And remember, you can always download podcasts on my website at syklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. We have never been more wired yet disconnected from each other. The world needs positive influence like never before because win-win is not good enough when our behaviors affect so many other parties, society, and the environment who aren't at the table. And that's exactly why I am thrilled to be joined by Huijin, who is the principal of Linhart Group, working with CEOs and future CEOs on their most difficult professional and personal issues. She was formerly with McKinsey, and has written Positive Influence, the first and last mile of leadership. Just came out a few months ago. Wishan, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Such a pleasure. So I always love to get to know the person behind the microphone. Wishan, do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about where you got interested in this topic of positive influence?
Well, I started my career as a consultant, and influence. Rapidly realized was so important because it wasn't just about what's the right answer and what people should do. I realized that oftentimes people don't do what they should do. So it was a journey of discovery to figure out how to influence people to do what they is good for them.
Wow, wow, that's interesting, and I know the passion that you have on this topic, so much so that you wrote a book. Again, it's called Positive Influence: The First and Last Mile of Leadership. So, yeah, people strive to have that positive influence when but what advice would you have? How can you retain that focus when there's so much negative influence that's around us? I mean, the $1 million question over here.
Well, I think it's such a great question. In fact, I got another question, which is why do we should even bother with positive influence when there's so much negative influence? Well, I would boldly say it is because there's so much negative influence that we need to have positive influence. But you're absolutely right. It is a fight every day, and I think it starts with inspiring ourselves and starts with inspiring each other because positive influence starts with the will to do so. And as you pointed out, how do we have continue to have that will and refuel that will every day? And I think we all have, at the deepest of our hearts, these dreams and these sense of purpose. So I think it's about building in daily routines that really remind us of that, and also have the challenge and high support of others to remind us that wow, we all want to have that positive influence. And how do we need to address the different pressure points that other people have that gets in the way of them having positive influence?
No question about it. And, that's a great segue into my next question, which is, certainly as we air this on the radio and, of course, on podcasts, there's a lot of folks that small business owners, entrepreneurs like us, but a lot of what I would call average people that are just looking to get started on raising their positive influence. What are some of those action items that they can take? How can the average person get started on raising their positive influence?
Well, I think it starts with asking ourselves, what's a reason or what's an arena of positive influence that you actually want to work on? It doesn't have to be just in business, even though as an entrepreneur myself, and I work with SME CEOs in addition to large company CEOs, we know that business is super super important. But perhaps it's something in your family life, perhaps it's in a friendship, or for a community cause that you really believe in, because I think we all have to be motivated to really want to do something better. So, what's your why of positive influence? Second thing you can do is go to our website, www.positiveinfluence.life, We have a 13 question little survey, a self assessment, but you can also get other people's feedback on 13 different dimensions of positive influence, both technique, but also about bring more of our whole being to bear. That can easily guide you on what are the 2 or 3 areas that if you uplifted yourself, your positive influence would almost miraculously, but definitely go be raised. And then try it in 1 or 2 higher stakes conversations in the next 2 weeks. Of course, leveraging the methodologies and the stories and examples from our book. And then I think you will see that, wow, everyone, including each one of us, can in fact have more positive influence. And that means we'll achieve more of our goals with less stress and get more of our time back for people and things that really matter in our life.
I'm chatting with Huijin Kong, principal of Linhart Group, who works with CEOs and future CEOs on their most difficult professional and personal issues. So the book is called Positive Influence, and the second line in that is the first and last mile of leadership, and that's what I want to focus on for a moment. Is why? Why do you characterize influence as the first and last mile of leadership, which is such a broad topic?
Absolutely. And one of the things my co-author Sun Yan and I did struggle with is the breadth of the topic. First and last mile of leadership. The last mile is the most obvious one, which is that, we walk into every room, every meeting with, let's say, with the right intent of here's the positive outcomes I want to make happen. And but every meeting, every person we encounter, every dialogue is unpredictable, right? People will might behave and act even very differently from what we think they should or they did last time. We ourselves might be very different. Maybe we're just in a funk that day. So last mile is all about how can we, despite whatever circumstances that come, still trying to bring to bear our best self, the most relevant part of ourselves that's necessary to have the positive influence on someone else. And that means that we really have to focus our being and our words and align those 2 things to making them think, feel, and do something different that is aligned to the positive outcomes we're aiming for. Now, the positive outcomes we're aiming for and really setting those very intentionally, making them very context specific, is really the first mile of leadership. We can do the right things right, but if we end up doing the wrong things, the fact that we did them right doesn't exactly help a lot. And here we think it's especially important to really think very expansively about all the different people that are affected by the particular task or particular conversation we may be having with 1, 2, 3 other person. Because as we have said and you have shared with everyone, win-win is not enough. It's oftentimes the positive outcomes and negative outcomes on the people outside the room, quote unquote, that is really what we're all struggling with.
Absolutely. I'm chatting with the subject matter expert on the topic of influence, something that's certainly relevant to our very diverse audience. But I'm just going to call it what it is. There's a lot of books out there about influence. How is positive influence, again, the first and last mile of leadership, how is it additive to many books on influence that have come before and likely will come after?
Yeah, so the definitive guide for influence, we would humbly say, was written 100 years ago by Mr. Dale Carnegie. How to Win Friends and Influence Better. It was in a different time, different era, the Depression. It was, very much focused on a very much more uniform America where you had to really sell yourself. And a lot of other books about influence have come since then, have been about negotiation, have been about certain techniques that will get you, more of the outcomes you want. We like to think that we're challenging people to think about those things, but apply them to a much more complex and conflictual world where a lot more people's needs and pressures need to be accounted for and need to be influenced. And it's not just about technique and process, but also about how to bring our unique being, each one of us, a beautiful human being inside of us, to bear, knowing that in the same exact conflict, the way you might tackle it and the way I would tackle it, even if we was aiming for exactly the same outcome, would be very different. And that difference and that uniqueness is glorious if we can master ourselves
Hmm.
and put the right part of ourselves, bring that to bear in that
Hmm.
conflict.
Well, we are just about out of time, and I want to make sure our listeners know where they can pick up a copy of Positive Influence and, of course, get in touch with you and your team. Huijin, how can we do that?
Check out our website, www.positiveinfluence.life, because it is about life, not just work, even though business work is super, super important. And of course, our book is readily available on Amazon. In fact, the ebook is 90% off right now at 99 cents, just for a few days more. So go and get your copy.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be right back on the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Don't touch that dial.